Right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 83rd episode of Retuning Your Firm. And I'm Richard Chaplin, and I'm very happy to be your co-host for today. What we're going to do is I will quickly introduce you to your two presenters, our two guests, Zoe and Andrew, give you a little bit of update on what's going on within the forum, and then Francesca will take it from there and talk us through our speakers in a bit more depth. So firstly, I'd like to just welcome very briefly Andrew and say good morning, Andrew. Welcome to the show and thank you for joining us. And secondly, I'd like to quickly introduce Zoe and say to Zoe, again, thank you very much for joining us and really looking forward to your contribution. Okay, back to me. So what are we doing now? Really wanted to basically just quickly talk about what the theme's about. As you recall, very high levels of uncertainty, and that was very much the case during the pandemic. And it really becomes quite problematic to analyze what the future looks like in that situation. Some people would call it risky. I think McKinsey called it dangerous. But as uncertainty lifts, we may not like what we see, but analysis becomes easier, and that really allows strategy to resume its vital role to help firms define and achieve successful outcomes. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We've got a 30-minute show, so I suspect we will be sharing tips rather than giving you major theories. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is just quickly talk you through some of the things that are going on in the forum. If you're not watching these videos, please do. And there's a new search engine which is under development, which is going to make it even easier to find that great video that you really want to watch again. The launch reception for the awards, the International Management Excellence Awards, took place yesterday in our amazing London Sky Lounge, and the video and the submission forms and all that stuff will be available at the beginning of next week for completion by the end of February. And the online ceremony is on the 15th of June, so please consider making a submission. The Winter's 22 Sector Trends Tracker, we used to do it on this show. It's now been passed to a research panel with over 90 firms on it, which is amazing. And that's now closed and will be shared, presented to the advisory board next week and then shared after that. And also, if you're looking at development, don't forget about the Mentor Match program, which is interested in both mentors and mentees. And in fact, some people are both, which is quite interesting. So that's probably about enough from me. So I will now, if I may, hand over to Francesca, who's going to talk us through our guest today.
Bless you, Richard. Thank you so much for that. Happy New Year, everybody. It's still not too late in the year to say that. We've got two fantastic panelists today, and you're going to hear a lot about strategy and about how you actually do something with strategy, which I think for most of us is a much more complicated beast. Easy sometimes to talk about it, much harder to do something with it. I'm incidentally Francesca Lagerberg, CEO of Baker Tilly International. They get happy when I actually mention the firm as well. First up, we're going to have Andrew Hedley. Andrew's career trajectory. He's been an architect, worked in professional services firms, worked there as a consultant, and he's going to take us through just a tiny little drop of the knowledge that he's gained over the last 30 plus years in strategy and leadership and how you turn those into something of real value. So Andrew, with no further ado, I'm going to hand to you.
Thank you, Francesca, and good morning, everyone. Really pleased to be here to talk a little bit about my take on strategy, I guess, and why it can be quite challenging in professional service firms. And I should start by saying, Francesca, your point there around easy to talk about, hard to do. I think strategies, it's much more an artisan craft than a sort of lofty academic pursuit. And too many of the strategies that I read, are sort of a mix of PhD thesis and work of fiction, and they're not really grounded in reality. They do make a compelling read, but they're sort of dislocated from the firm's competitive position. So for me, what's at the core strategy? And for me, at the core strategy, it's about making choices about the allocation of scarce resources to create this thing we call a sustainable competitive advantage. So that thing about choice sits at the core strategy. What we do and what we choose not to do is really tough in professional service firms. It's tough because of all of our stakeholder constituencies, all of the dimensions of what suits one constituency doesn't suit another. But it's really important that we strive to do that. And I guess one of the sort of acid tests of how you know you've got a strategy is when you're prepared to say no to great ideas that don't fit. And many professional service firms are really bad at saying no to great ideas that don't fit. So really, this is all about coherence and alignment. And as Jim Collins said, great strategy really, it's 1% of vision. and it's 99% of alignment. And my job and the work I do, and I suggest to you, your job in the firms you lead, is to make things more simple, not more complex. Anybody can make things complicated. There's a real skill in making things simple. So in striving for simplicity, I tend to focus just on 4 questions. 2 of them come from the sort of Lafferty and Martin Playing to Win work, which I think is really interesting. And you probably see a copy of the book behind me on my side, which I use quite a lot to refer to. Where to play, where to compete, in which markets, for what sort of clients and for what sort of work, and having made those choices, how to win in those markets. So if you like, they're the 2 sort of, if you like, external facing questions. I also think in our sorts of organizations, we achieve success through our people. So I think there are also 2 really important people questions that we need to address. The first is why join? Why would anybody join us? What's our sort of value proposition? Why would some join? And having joined us, why stay? And again, I think getting that people proposition right is really important. And all the evidence there, going right back to the service profit chain, creates that link between, clear vision, a well-founded strategy, a strong culture, engaging our people, that driving client loyalty, and that client loyalty driving sustainable business success. So really, those 4 questions, if we answer those 4 questions, we're making a really good start in terms of creating a well-founded strategy. So where to play, how to win, why join, why stay. The other thing I'd say is for the vast majority of firms I work with, we've got to start from where we are now. And there's a theory called the resource-based view, which basically says, what are our resources and how can we deploy them more effectively than the competition? I'm also a logical incrementalist. I think it's really important that we know where we're going. We've got that really clear vision in mind. But actually, strategy takes place in bite-sized chunks. It's an incremental approach. It's about being aligned and being purposeful, but being incremental. And for some firms, there may be a big bang transformational opportunity, but for the majority, that's not how strategy works in practice. I think it's also about recipes rather than ingredients. And we know how difficult it is to differentiate between firms, especially firms in a particular weight class. If you think about it objectively, if we get a score sheet and we score 2 firms against each other, well, they've both got great people, and those people tend to be from a similar background, which is not a good thing, but that's the reality of where we are. They've been to the same universities, they're qualified into the same profession, they're using the same IT systems. They're very, very, very similar in many, many measures. Often the big difference I see is culture, and through culture, leadership. That's the secret ingredient firms have. But fundamentally, it's about how we put together our ingredients, which are very similar to the competition's ingredients, to create a recipe which is both attractive to the client and really hard for the competition to copy. People are at the core strategy, and to give effective strategy, people need to change what they do and how they behave in our sorts of organizations. And for me, at its core, that's a leadership and a cultural challenge. But it's also why simplicity and clarity and communication are just so important. If people don't understand what we're trying to achieve, and they don't understand their role in making that happen, then we can't be surprised if nothing changes. So in that sense, change, the ability to affect change, is at the core of the strategy. And my strong view is change is a leadership, not a management issue. And John Cotter's seminal work, Leading Change, it's called Leading Change. It's not called Managing Change. And of course, the people on this webinar carry the badges of leaders in their firms. And it's a big responsibility. And I think it's important that we all reflect on how we lead and how we encourage leadership behaviors in those we work with, in our approach and our style, and how we facilitate success in those around us. So my core message is really, strategy's got to be simple, it's got to be coherent, it's got to be aligned, it's got to be purposeful and incremental. It's about recipes as well as ingredients, but we give it effect by having our people giving a clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve, what they need to do to help us, and how to behave differently, and how do we as leaders facilitate that. So as a summary, culture and leadership underpin everything, and how we bring about cultural change and develop our future leaders are the competencies on which we need to focus now. That's it from me, Francesca. Hope that was useful, and back over to you.
Incredibly useful, Andrew. I know we're going to ask you lots of questions later. I remember when I was when I was starting out, there was the old adage, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I always remember, at least make strategy a good meal. I mean, don't ignore the fact that they do both have a value. So let's move into a conversation with Zoe Bailey. Again, fantastic number of years of experience in the whole field of strategy and a passion around how strategy can really make a difference, most particularly about how you can bring alive what that means for a business. So Zoe, take us away with some of your thoughts around this area, about those practicalities.
Thank you, Francesca, and great to hear from Angie there. And thank you for having me along today. So I have spoken before about the creation of strategic frameworks and the importance of bringing those to life. Today, I'm going to very much assume that strategy and having strategic intent in your firm is very much a given. I mean, having a strategic focus, you could argue, is critical to continuing business success. And boy, are we grappling with many factors at the moment at a macro level. There is so much going on. But at that practical level, I found that there are three things that I'm particularly focusing on at the moment when we're rebooting our strategy. And that is very much about learning from the past, being agile, and very aligned with Andrew around keeping it simple. So taking each of those in turn, learning from the past. Well, while today's world is very different from yesterday's, last year's, a decade ago, many of the issues businesses grapple with and that we're grappling with keep resurfacing. We're hearing constantly productivity, profitability, service levels, market differentiating, culture and happy people, to name a few. There's much that we can learn from what's worked well in the past and what hasn't. And these past experiences can sometimes constrain us. So joining Withers and Rogers, as I have in the last few years, I'm hearing and grappling with, well, we've tried that in the past, or we've done that, or that's been considered previously. There are two important words to focus on here: tried and past. The here and now could be significantly different, and the people that are available to help have likely also changed. So I think really it's about not being constrained by your own story, the story of the business, and the story of others. And we all have our own experiences that can add value and can help us grapple with things slightly differently. So make sure you take a step back and look for intended and unintended consequences and look for balance when making that decision. Number two, being agile and changing course if needs be. When I talk about strategy, I talk about the strategy being a course that you plot on a journey. And when you plot that course, if you're in a boat and you're heading from one destination to the other, that might need to change depending on the factors outside of our control, such as weather or sick crew members. In business, micro and macro factors can mean that we have to suddenly prioritize new things. And it's important to be alert to these factors and the changing dynamics and make sure you're not rigid in your response. One way to keep agile is to surround yourself with new ideas. So I have a question for you all to just quickly think in your mind. When you're in need of advice, when you're not sure what to do, who do you turn to? If your answer is the same in each scenario, or is a number of highly trusted, confident people who are well known to you, perhaps it's time to broaden your support network. Turning to like-minded people, typically these are people we gravitate to because we have more in common in terms of our thinking, can limit our thinking. It can lead to groupthink or reinforcement on similar ideas. So casting your net wider can create different thinking and different solutions. And finally, keeping it simple. So my experience has been the more simple a strategy, the more successful. I'm a big fan of using acronyms to help bring about recollection of business strategies across the whole firm. So BDO, the acronym I brought in was BUILD, stood for brand, unifying culture, international leading markets and digital mindset. And at Withers and Rogers, we refer to GROW, which is great people, reward and recognition, operational excellence, and winning worldwide. So each of that under GROW actually links to the 4 Ps of people, profit, processes, and prospects. What matters is that people know what the strategy is, what part they play in it, and why it matters. So the creation of a strategy, in many respects, I think is the easy part. It's actually bringing it to life that's really hard, but so important and rewarding. After achieving this successfully at BDO, I'm now on the journey to achieve this at Withers and Rogers. but it takes time. And whilst grow is our anchor, the strategic priorities must flex and change to the external and internal needs of the business. So we have a robust process to identify these priorities, and that's important. We do that through leadership meetings, through engagement, and through challenging each other. And most importantly, we do it through listening and having an open mindset. So keeping strategy simple helps this process, and it provides a roadmap for change. It helps ensure that emerging strategies are aligned to the overall strategy of the firm. So I appreciate that nothing I've said today is new to you all. However, hopefully it's a helpful reminder to make time to think through your strategic priorities, be open to new ideas, and take people with you. Keep it simple, keep it agile, and be open.
Fantastic. I was going to quickly maybe ask Francesca to add a couple of thoughts on, as a CEO, what is strategy? How important is strategy for you in your CEO role?
It's huge. I mean, it's probably one of the core jobs of a CEO to have a strategic intent that you can deliver. But I think there's something very compelling about what we've just heard about. You can have something that looks magnificent on a piece of paper and you just can't deliver it, or it actually becomes so complicated, people don't understand it, or you can't get buy-in to it. It's all very well spending 18 months, 2 years drafting up something, but if people don't buy into it, they don't do it, they won't execute on it. I remember a very wise person saying to me, if you can execute on 60% of your strategy, you're doing probably better than almost everyone you're ever going to meet. And perhaps there's something about the layering that we put on strategies to make them look perfect and beautiful and extraordinary. And the reality, perhaps that keep it simple point, which you both mentioned, is that doing a few things really well and really rigorously is just the most effective thing. And if you look at the people who've been groundbreakers in strategic thinking, they very often have 4 or 5 maximum things that they're looking to do. They relentlessly focus on them, and when they're done them, they call an end to it. That's what we do. They rather than keep perpetuating something when it no longer makes sense. So yeah, a huge part of any senior manager, managing partner, departmental lead, how you're strategically aligning as an organization and what you're really trying to do collectively is the difference probably between real success and doing okay.
Fantastic. And do you have any questions for our 2 guests today, Francesca?
I've got hundreds. This is like a free consultancy. I mean, I love this. I think maybe if I start, Andrew, with you, because I love all the play to win, that bit. I think a lot of professional services firms struggle with how to be that intentional, because opportunistic wins are probably the how most businesses start, but often can be how they continue to grow. I get this great thing, I'm going to do it because why wouldn't I? How do you help people to be that intentional about where they're spending their time in that strategic focus?
It's a really good question, Francesca, and you're right. That a lot of professionals in their day job are quite opportunistic. I think that's regrettable, but it's the reality of the world in which they live. And so I think the whole alignment point is not saying we'll only do one thing, only have one direction, but we'll have a direction of travel in which that becomes 80%, 90% of what we do. And what I've found is over time, the silly questions start to disappear. I think sitting with management teams pre-strategy, they get bombarded with lots of questions from partners who want to do various things, some which are clearly great ideas, some which are clearly bonkers. But the management team's having to respond to all of these things. Once we set that direction and we've got that intent, we still get asked initially some more silly ideas, but we give people the yardstick to say, does your idea align with our intent, with our strategy? If the answer is no, then think twice about asking it, because we'll be saying, where's the alignment? We ask those questions, we allow people to pre-filter. And over a couple of cycles, people appreciate that unless they can demonstrate how their idea fits with the overall direction of the business, they stop asking the silly ideas. So it takes 2 or 3 cycles, but eventually people understand this is the yardstick by which the management team will judge the validity of the idea. Is it on strategy or not? Answer yes or no. If the answer is yes, how does this fit in terms of other priorities we've got within our strategic agenda? So I think that's about management that have been pretty clear. So again, that clarity point is really, really important. Being really clear about what's in play and what's not in play. and then being prepared to say no to great ideas that don't fit.
Yeah, then that's lovely, and that's kind of North Star kind of approach, holding true. And Zoe, I love your build. I know you've mentioned this once before in a program, 83 programs. I guess have we done 83? It was very early on. I'd love you just to repeat it because it's so brilliant. And also, have you evolved it since you first did it? That whole build concept.
Well, Build was at my previous firm at BDO. So Build we brought into the business maybe, gosh, that's probably around 6 years ago at BDO. And then there was a whole journey that business went through in terms of bringing that to life through the creation of internal boards, actually. So the whole then management structure evolved around living and breathing Build. So we had a brand board and a unifying culture board, the international board, leading markets board. And that really, as Andrew was saying, then helped focus mindsets around that. And particularly as BDO is a large business and it needed that structure, I think, to bring that to life. Withers and Rogers, so I've been with the business for around 2 years now. So is this a different acronym because it's a different business? And that's important to recognise. You can't shoehorn the same strategy into a different firm, even if there are many similarities in that it's a professional service firm and partner-led. And what was clear very much were those 4 areas that are critical to our business success, and that's people, because we're a professional service firm. That's reward and recognition, and there's something around making people feel more recognised, understanding what great looks like, and making sure that we can retain, as Andrew was saying, why do people want to stick here, and how are we rewarding them and making sure that we remain relevant in the market. Operational excellence, because we're on a journey to try to optimise how we deliver our services in the most optimum way, and then winning worldwide, because we have European reach, but our clients are worldwide, and that is really important to us. So actually, I would say last year, my first year at the firm was the easy part, putting that together, working with the leaders, doing all the relevant interviews, understanding that. It's hard now because it's about bringing that to life. And there are a number of things that we're doing to achieve that. So we've created a new competency framework, which is grounded in our strategic framework, so that everyone's behaviours are then aligned to that strategic intent. And then more recently, we've just met as a leadership, and we're working through, we've got a meeting next week to really determine our strategic priorities. So what are those core things that Andrew is referring to, that those 3 or 4 things that we are going to prioritise this year to keep us all focused, and those will obviously be aligned to our growth strategy.
And there's something, maybe one more from me, Richard, that's okay. There's something very powerful there about the fact that there is a lot of hard work in getting strategy to execution. The fun bit might sometimes is the creation, that the reality is getting it done. And I feel your pain, you've got the strategy, you believe in it, actually getting it across the line. But I also like very much the point that both of you have raised about a strategy for an organisation has to be true to that organisation. A lot of accounting firms, which is the area I know best, you put their strategies side by side and they're pretty similar because they're all doing audit and tax, accounting is legal, but they are very different organizations. And maybe a question for both of you is, if you're really trying to differentiate yourself in the market, being true to yourself, it is really important to do that piece around making your strategy fit to the organization, not just pick it off a shelf, as it were. And presumably you've seen that in practice. Now, how do you encourage people to think about making it true to themselves rather than just something that is just an off the peg kind of strategy?
Should I?
Please go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Francesca. And it goes to this point that if you objectively, if you like, scorecard organisations, they're very similar, operating in similar markets with similar services to similar clients. So what's the difference? And that's where I think the whole linkage between the people who deliver the service on the ground, the execution of that service, the experience that they provide for the clients is so important, which is why I keep coming back to leadership and culture. And when I look at firms that are doing, really, really well, and firms that are doing okay, but they could definitely do better, they say, what's the difference? Peel under the surface, what's the difference? The difference is actually quite simple. if they know what they're there to do and what not to do, if they've got a really clear strategy, the people are aligned behind it, and the culture of the business is driving high performance. That's the difference. Not have they got more clever people in this firm, not have they got a better IT system in this firm. It's all about people, culture, performance and behaviour, in my experience. And that's where I think leadership has to change in many organisations. I think many organisations, are still moving from the sort of the command and control style of leadership to what should be much more, in my view, a servant style of leadership. How, as a leader, do I facilitate my people to be successful? And as a leader, how do I imbue leadership behaviours right through the organisation? So someone may not wear the badge of leader, but how they behave is like a leader. They take personal responsibility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the differences I see between firms, because you're right, objectively, they're doing very similar things, very similar clients in very similar ways. So why would I buy Francesca rather than Richard?
Because you know it makes sense.
Absolutely. It's still my punchline, but yes, absolutely. Is that helpful as a...
No, that's fantastic. That's really useful. I don't know, Zoe, if you've got anything to add to that.
I've recently, within the business, referred to the fact that we're swimming in a sea of vanilla. There's so much commonality in terms of even looking at websites, what we're saying about each other, but that provides a real opportunity. And then to me, it comes down to two critical things. One, around the culture is what's your purpose? So what makes this business different and special from a cultural perspective? Why do people want to get in that boat with you in the first place? Why do they want to join your business? So it's all about your purpose, and then making sure that purpose holds you to account in terms of your decision making. And then it's aligning that with what's your unique selling point in the market. So we definitely understand what our purpose is in terms of the journey to making it really real. It's, what is our unique selling point? That is our focus at the moment. So absolutely living and breathing this stuff at the moment daily.
Excellent. Richard.
Well, I've got all of 1 minute left, so that's great. Didn't have to do too much today, but that's lovely. Look, I think that was a masterclass in strategy. I think that's the only way I can express it. We've covered so many different bases. I think going back to Andrew's 4 questions, that was really helpful. So let me just open the gallery view so everybody can see everybody, which is good. So thank you, Andrew, for encouraging us. You did mention logical incrementalism, which I suspect most people is a bit early in the morning, but where to play, how to win, why join us, and why stay with us, I think are really very powerful questions. I think a lot of strategy just focuses on the first 2 and then goes straight to resources, doesn't really think enough about the people agenda. We're people businesses. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then Zoe, learning from the past and being willing to not to be constrained by history, I suppose, but do it in a sensible way. Keep it agile and make sure that you do actually turn to people who aren't part of your normal group of your groupthink, your friends, your contacts, and then both of you keep it simple. And that's the hardest. There's a lovely letter where they said, sorry, I'm sorry this letter is so long, I didn't have time to write you a short one. I think that summarizes it beautifully. So on behalf of the panel, can I thank you all today? Thank the audience. We've had 100% attendance throughout this seminar, which I think is a record. So brilliant. Thank you both. Videos will be up next week. And in 2 weeks' time, I'll be back with Francesca. And this time we kind of are looking back to the past, but we're kind of saying, what were the lessons from 2008 and roundabout? And I've got a couple of people, Neville Eisenberg and Tim Aspinall, who were managing partners at the time. They're now not, but they were at the time. So what was their experiences? Because we can all learn from that history too, I think, given what we may be facing us. So thank you all. And thank you, everybody on the call. Look forward to catching up in 2 weeks' time. And in the meantime, have a great day. Bye for now.